Well, I guess this week wasn't too bad. Of course, that means it was definitely very far from good, especially given all of the scenes with less than stellar value. So let's get into this week's spoiler review for the Peripheral on Amazon Prime. We begin this week with Mom washing dishes when her vision goes out. She asks the vet on guard duty, Reese, to take her to the doctor without telling Burton and Flynn. As they drive over the bridge leading to the property, we see that the old hitman is watching the house, and he follows them. The inspector is still retarded, and the scenes this week do nothing to dissuade me of the fact that either the character is overwritten or overacted. Or maybe it is a combination of the two, because the inspector is easily the most annoying character in this show. Last week left us with her questioning Lev and asking to see the peripherals and their operators. This week she decides to take them with her, and Flynn asks for Wilf to accompany them. Then we get a scene that probably should have been combined with another, because all it was a shot of Reese getting Mom to Doc Dee, and Doc Dee letting her nurse go on break before getting Mom up on the exam table. While that is happening, Deputy Dumbass is at the clerk's office again, and this time he is inquiring about any evidence that was logged following his crash. The clerk looks and finds that the only thing logged in was his totaled cruiser. Back with the inspector, her assistant takes Burton and Connor into a training sim in a building, and they basically redo the game of death, each level of the building having a more difficult number of enemies until the roof, where a surprise awaits. What's the surprise? Well, then it wouldn't be a surprise. They are accompanied by the assistant, who is Superwoman, and we find out later why. They take no weapons into the fight but what they can acquire while ascending the building's 8 levels. Then Deputy Dumbass breaks into the impound yard to look over his cruiser, hoping to find the hitman's pistol and quote-unquote doodad, aka the sonic gun. He finds them just as the sheriff calls him to get him over to the pickets to help him with trouble which he keeps rather vague. The old hitman then pulls up outside of the clinic and cuts himself to give him a reason to be there. He stumbles into the clinic and lures Reese into helping him, then stabbing him multiple times as the two fight. The hitman eventually kills him with a chokehold. Ash and Ossian discuss the inspector's visit, with Ossian wanting to bug out. Lev asks Ash to pull up the peripheral's point of view so he can see what the inspector is up to, but Ash flat out tells him she won't. She tells him the inspector would know she was accessing the peripherals, and that she was probably listening in on their conversation. The inspector tells Flynn that Connor did not lose his limbs in their timeline, that RI started going back to past timelines at least 10 years before they were assuming. She also informs Flynn that the jackpot was accelerating in Flynn's timeline due to RI's meddling, seemingly on purpose. She also tells her that in the future's timeline, Burton died in the war and Flynn married Deputy Dumbass, who was sheriff eventually. They then show Burton and Connor fighting their way up the building. The hitman taunts Doc Dee about what it takes to stab someone when he sees her looking at the knife he used on Reese. Yeah, that was it. That's the end of the scene. Then we get the stupidest ending to the whole building training sim sequence that they could possibly have come up with. The surprise at the top of the building is that they have to fight the assistant. The fight choreography was terrible, not that any of the other fight scenes in the building were great, and she winds up snapping Burton's neck with ease and then kicking Connor off the roof, which for some reason he loved as he laughed all the way down. The inspector is rapid-firing Flynn with questions while that is going on. Flynn gets to ask 3 of her own, but only gets to ask 2 before the inspector says time is up and sends her out of the Peripheral. When the 3 of them come out of the sim, Burton gets a text from Reese that he took Mom to the clinic, and they rush out to go to her. Yeah, again, that's it. Deputy Dumbass gets to Pickett's house to find the door open and bloody footprints leading outside. He goes into the backyard and finds the sheriff and Pickett talking. The sheriff then orders him to go arrest Burton and Flynn, coming up with a story about how Burton and his vet buddies got into the drug game and pissed off the wrong person, who then sent the hitman. The hitman escaped, went to the Pickett's house, killed Mrs. Pickett, and stole a car. When Deputy Dumbass doesn't believe the story and tells him he won't arrest the siblings, the sheriff lays it out for him, how he needs to stop pretending he doesn't know how the town works and who everybody works for. Since he works for the sheriff and the sheriff works for Pickett, then he works for Pickett too. The inspector watches the building training sim footage with her assistant and asks her opinion of the 2 men. The assistant says Burton is steady, but in a crisis she would go to Connor for reasons she can't quantify. The inspector then tells the assistant that she's not sure of Flynn quite yet. It is about that time that Boss Lady shows up for a chat, and the inspector tells the assistant that someone got there faster than she was expecting, but that she was expecting someone from RI, since she let her security slip when she went into Lev's to see who would be watching. Deputy Dumbass is then shown throwing a tantrum in his car before eyeing the hitman's gun and sonic pistol. Yeah, again, that was it. Another scene that could have been and should have been merged with others or not shown at all. Leading right into another scene that should have been merged with the scene of the siblings getting out of the sim. They are in the car heading towards the clinic when they reread the text from Reese and realize it is a trap with Reese probably dead. Then again, we cut to Boss Lady arriving at the inspector's office with Robot Thug. She babbles arrogantly about the assistant, revealing that the assistant is actually a peripheral with a self-running brain. She talks about how most people make their robots look like family or acquaintances, revealing that the assistant looks like the inspector's dead daughter. The inspector then has the assistant power down and erase the last 5 minutes of conversation, so she will not remember she looks like her daughter. Boss Lady then reveals she is there to report a theft. And we cut again to Lev walking in on Ash and Ossian plotting while assuming they cannot be understood while speaking in their private language. Lev disabuses them of that notion, and he threatens to kill Ossian unless Ash tells him what they are plotting about. Ash tells him that Alita stored the info she stole from RI in Flynn's brain in the form of a bacteria, that it is an untraceable way to hide information. When pressed, she reveals that she was going to give the information to the Neoprims, so that they could use it to burn down their world and start it anew. Again, where the hell was the foundation for that scene? Then we learn that Boss Lady is a commie. She tells the inspector that Alita stole research on neural implants RI was working on that would allow RI to manipulate human brains to be more compliant and less individualistic. That it was humanity's free will and human nature that caused the jackpot. The inspector guesses that RI would not want that information to get out because people would not care to be RI zombies. Boss Lady admits that it is for that reason and to prevent the implants from being hacked that she is involving the Met. She knows Alita and a peripheral were involved in the heist, and that Wilf was near another crime scene that involved RI. When the inspector asks what Boss Lady wants her to do about it, Boss Lady tells her that she wants Lev's entire family destroyed, along with anyone in the past who had anything to do with it, including Flynn and all of her allies. When the siblings get to the clinic, they have Leon hook into Reese's haptics to make him twitch, allowing them to separate the hitman from Doc Dee and Mom in the infrared scope. Burton shoots the hitman, and they rush in to make sure Doc and Mom are alright. Back at Pickett's place, Deputy Dumbass comes back in the house, telling the sheriff he has an alternative plan for what to do. He points the hitman's gun at the sheriff, lays out the story he will tell when the rest of the department gets there, and shoots him, emptying the gun in him. Pickett then tries to talk him down, saying he does not think Deputy Dumbass has it in him to shoot him, nor the bullets. Pickett lunges for his own gun, presumably? We never get to see because Deputy Dumbass pulls out the sonic gun and shoots him, sending Pickett flying through the glass door behind him. And that is where they end the episode. This episode was not nearly as annoying as previous episodes, but I think that was mainly because they edited the hell out of this episode. It was so chopped up that we got a bunch of vignettes that broke up the few longer scenes that moved things forward. There was a lot of stupid still in the writing for this episode, not the least of which is still the inspector. Joining that idiocy was both the assistant being a peripheral without a pilot, and Deputy Dumbass deciding to kill both the sheriff and Pickett in a wild swing of character for him. We learn in the preview for next week's finale that Pickett is probably not dead, which is also stupid. There was some forward movement of the plot in this episode, so it was not a total loss, but it was done in such a ham-handed way that I blame most on the director and the editor. If they were going to do a game of death sort of sequence with Burton and Connor's peripherals, it should have been with one long shot, 2 or 3 long shots at most. Instead, we got 30-second vignettes while we got minutes-long scenes between the inspector and Flint, both of which were less than captivating and wasted runtime. If they were going to have a servant uprising among Lev's people, it needed more build-up. Instead, we get Ash deciding to knife Lev in the back out of the blue with no precipitating or foundational scenes to explain why. All in all, this was an improvement over last week, but I'm not sure it's enough of an improvement going into the finale. If there were another couple of episodes to go, I could see them ending on a satisfactory upswing in quality. However, there are not, and they wasted several episodes speeding down a hill that ends in a cliff. They started clawing their way back up the cliff with this episode, but they are still hanging on the side of a cliff with this show. With that in mind, the finale better be spectacular. That is all for this week's review of The Peripheral. If you like what I do here, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure the bell icon is clicked on so you know when new videos are uploaded. Share the video and leave a comment or constructive criticism below. It really does help with Mama Susan and her algorithm. I'm away from the house for the next few days as I forgot about a commitment, so the Disney video I've been working on will be pushed to next week. See you in the next video. Tschüss.